The room shifted the moment he walked in. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a subtle tightening of posture, a collective straightening of backs, a silence that rippled outward like a warning. Conversations dimmed. Glasses paused midair. Even the piano player softened his touch without realizing it. Brandon Whitmore loved that feeling. He paused just inside the entrance of Marcellus, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, letting the attention settle over him like a tailored coat. The lighting glinted off his watch. His shoes struck the marble with deliberate confidence. Power, to Brandon, wasn't just about money. It was about presence. It was about knowing that when you entered a room, the room adjusted. Tonight was important, monumental. Across the dining room, seated at a corner table under a soft amber light, waited Caleb Sterling. Quiet, calculating, a man who rarely spoke unnecessarily and never invested carelessly. If Caleb signed tonight, Brandon's acquisition would go through $3.5 billion to expand Whitmore Global into Europe and Southeast Asia. 3 continents under one banner. His banner. He adjusted his cufflinks as the maitre d' hurried forward. "Mr. Whitmore, we're honored." "I'm sure you are," Brandon replied with a thin smile. He crossed the dining room like a king surveying his court. When he reached the table, Caleb stood politely and extended a hand. "Brandon, Caleb, let's make history." They sat. Across the room, 20-year-old Aaliyah Brooks smoothed her apron and took a steady breath. She had worked at Marcellus for nearly a year now. It wasn't just a job to her. It was structure, stability, a place where excellence mattered. She liked that. She needed that. Her mother's medical bills sat in a folder beneath Aaliyah's bed at home. Her younger brother, Marcus, had college acceptance letters pinned to their refrigerator with magnets shaped like cartoon fruit. Every double shift she worked had a purpose. "Table 14, her manager whispered gently. "Mr. Whitmore, be precise." Aaliyah nodded. She approached with calm steps, spine straight, expression warm but professional. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Marcellus. May I begin with?" Brandon snapped his fingers, not loudly, but sharply enough to slice through her sentence. "Let's move it along," he muttered. "We're on a schedule." Aaliyah felt the words hit her chest, but her face did not change. "Of course, sir." Caleb noticed. His gaze lingered on Brandon for half a second longer than before. She took their drink order. An aged bourbon, neat for Brandon. Sparkling mineral water for Caleb. When she returned, she placed Caleb's water down first. Then she carefully set Brandon's bourbon in front of him. A single drop splashed over the rim. One tiny amber bead landed on the white tablecloth. It was barely visible, dissolving almost instantly into fabric. But Brandon stared at it as if she had shattered a crystal decanter over his head. The air shifted again. "I'm so sorry, sir," Aaliyah said immediately. "I'll replace the cloth right away." Brandon leaned back slowly, his chair creaking under the deliberate movement. His face twisted, not in inconvenience, but in offense. "You're incompetent," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Do you even know what you're doing?" Aaliyah's fingers tightened around her order pad. "It was just a small splash." "I'll fix it." "Just a splash," he barked. "People like you always say that. No attention to detail. No discipline. They hire anyone these days." The words carried an edge that made a nearby couple glance over. Caleb's jaw tightened. Aaliyah's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She had dealt with difficult customers before. Impatient executives, drunk socialites, entitled heirs. But there was something else in Brandon's tone. Something personal. Something sharp. "I apologize, sir," she repeated quietly. Brandon leaned forward now, lowering his voice just enough to make it more cutting. "I come here to close billion-dollar deals, not to be served by amateurs who can't manage a glass." Caleb set his water down carefully. "Brandon," he said calmly. It was a drop. Brandon waved him off. "That's not the point." "It seems exactly like the point." Brandon's smile stiffened. You don't build empires by being soft, Caleb. Standards matter. Aaliyah stood there, unsure whether to leave or wait. Caleb looked at her directly. You may replace the cloth if you'd like, he said gently. Thank you, she whispered. She turned toward the service station, her vision slightly blurred, but her posture unbroken. Behind her, Brandon scoffed. See what I mean? Fear works. They respond to authority. Caleb didn't answer. When Aaliyah returned with a fresh cloth, the silence at the table felt different. Heavy, charged. She replaced it swiftly, professionally. Brandon continued, as if nothing had happened. Once we restructure their executive branch, profits double within 18 months. Conservative estimate. This acquisition is a legacy move. Caleb stared at the clean tablecloth. Brandon, he said quietly, let me ask you something. Go ahead. Is this how you treat people when there aren't cameras around? Brandon blinked. Excuse me. The way you spoke to her. Brandon let out a sharp laugh. You're serious? Yes. She spilled my drink. A drop. Brandon's voice hardened. You can't afford to be weak in leadership. People respect strength. Respect, Caleb repeated slowly. Or fear. Same outcome. No, Caleb said. Very different. Brandon's confidence flickered just slightly. Caleb, don't tell me you're about to jeopardize a $3.5 billion expansion over a Waitress. Caleb's gaze did not waver. I'm about to make a decision based on character. Brandon's stomach tightened. Character? Yes, because I don't invest in numbers alone. I invest in leaders. Brandon leaned back, irritation rising. You're overreacting. Caleb reached for his briefcase. I don't think I am. The faint click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. Caleb, Brandon said, laughter forced now. Be rational. Caleb stood. The movement drew eyes from across the dining room. Deal's off, he said calmly. The words seemed to echo. Brandon stood abruptly, chair scraping harshly against marble. You can't be serious. I am. Because of her, Brandon gestured vaguely toward Aaliyah. Because of you. Brandon felt heat crawl up his neck. This is business. No, Caleb replied. This is ethics. You're throwing away billions. Caleb buttoned his coat slowly. I'm protecting billions. My name, my investors, my reputation. I won't attach them to someone who treats people as disposable. Brandon's chest tightened. You're making a mistake. Caleb paused near the entrance. The entire restaurant had fallen silent. No, he said evenly. You made one. And then he walked out. For a moment, Brandon just stood there. The weight of a room full of eyes pressed against his back. But this time, there was no admiration in them. No awe. Only discomfort. Judgment. Disgust. He turned sharply toward Aaliyah. Do you know what you just cost me? He snapped. Before she could answer, the restaurant manager stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, you need to leave. I practically fund this place. You don't fund our values. Security approached, not aggressive but firm. For the first time that evening, Brandon felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, exposure. He stormed out into the night air. By morning, the story had spread. A patron's phone video captured enough audio. Business networks replayed the footage. Investor Caleb Sterling withdraws $3.5 billion deal following public confrontation with CEO Brandon Whitmore. Headlines multiplied. Shares of Whitmore Global fell 61% in 2 days. Board members called emergency meetings. Sponsors distanced themselves. Employees leaked stories. Patterns. Past behavior. The empire began to tremble. In his glass office, Brandon stared at red numbers flashing across a screen. But money could not unsay words. Across town, Aaliyah arrived for her shift expecting whispers. Instead, she found respect. You handled yourself with dignity, her manager told her. 3 days later, an envelope waited with her name. Inside was a handwritten note. Aaliyah, the way you carried yourself under pressure spoke volumes. Grace reveals strength. Please accept this not as charity, but as recognition. Caleb Sterling. Beneath the note was a check. $50,000. Tears slid down her cheeks, this time from relief. Months later, Whitmore Global announced Brandon Whitmore's resignation. He watched from a penthouse that felt far too quiet. Power without character fractures. Influence without humanity corrodes. And sometimes the smallest moment, a single drop of bourbon on white linen, reveals the entire truth of a person. At Marcellus, Aaliyah tied her apron before another shift, steadier now. Because sometimes cruelty echoes loudly, but dignity echoes longer. And in the end, the man who thought he ruled the room lost everything, while the woman he tried to diminish walked forward with her head high.